The chandeliers blazed like cruel suns, throwing every whisper, every stare, into sharper relief. Evelina stood at the center of the ballroom, her name hissing through the air like poison. This was no dance, it was an execution. Honoria's satisfied smile glimmered in the crowd. Ashford lingered beside her, vulture-like, savoring the spectacle. The trap had been sprung, and Evelina was its prize. For weeks, she had stolen moments with the Duke letters hidden in candlelight, touches exchanged in shadow, promises whispered like prayers. But stolen moments cannot remain hidden forever. Tonight, society demanded its reckoning. The Duke stepped forward, eyes blazing, daring the room to breathe against him. Yet Evelina knew, to stand with him was to fall with him. Her pulse thundered, judgment pressed in from every corner. Love had carried her this far, but now it demanded everything. Would she choose silence, preserving a hollow place in society's good graces? Or risk ruin for the only man who had ever truly seen her? The room waited, breathless, for Evelina's answer. The air was suffocating, not from lack of oxygen, but from expectation, thick, heavy, and perfumed with lavender, bergamot, and the metallic tang of desperation Evelina Whitcombe could taste at the back of her throat. Her gloved hands trembled as she pressed them against the silk of her gown. No one could see the double stitches running along the seams of her gloves, but she felt them. She always felt them. The tiny ridges mocked her with every movement, a secret truth hidden in plain sight, just like her family's debts. The chandeliers above spilled their brilliance onto polished marble floors, gilded mirrors, and gowns shimmering like liquid jewels. Laughter rippled, flirtations bloomed, and the music of violins swelled with unrelenting cheer. But under it all, beneath the glitter and the perfume, Evelina knew the truth. This was not a ball. This was a marketplace, and she was the prize no one had yet claimed. Remember, her father's voice pressed against her ear, too soft for anyone else, too sharp for her to ignore. Tonight is not a night for hesitation. The creditors will not wait much longer. She turned her head, meeting his eyes, once steady and proud, now shadowed with sleepless nights and shame. His cravat was tied perfectly, his coat pressed, but she saw the fray at the edge of his cuff. She saw everything. "I know, Papa," she whispered, swallowing the tightness in her throat. "I will do what must be done." He squeezed her hand briefly, as though to comfort, though it felt more like chains being fastened. Then he released her into the current of society, into the swirl of silk and judgment. Everywhere she moved, heads turned. She was too beautiful to be ignored, cascades of dark hair gleaming under candlelight, eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, skin luminous as porcelain. And yet, beneath every admiring glance she heard it, the whispers. Such beauty, wasted on empty pockets. They say Whitcombe can barely keep servants on wages. No dowry, no fortune, just a pretty face. The words slithered through the air, carried by fans snapping shut, and lips pressed too close to ears. Evelina forced her smile wider, trained perfection, though her chest burned. Because if she faltered now, if they saw the fear trembling beneath the paint and pearls, she would be destroyed before the night even ended. "Evelina," a sharp voice, too loud, too amused. "Lady Honoria," her lips curved like the edge of a blade, her gown blood-red and daring. "My, how radiant you look this evening. One would think you had not a care in the world." The laughter that followed was cruel, brittle. Evelina dipped her head with practiced grace. "Thank you, Lady Honoria." She kept walking, every step rehearsed. She had to, because what else did she have? Beauty was her weapon, her shield, her currency. If she let the mask slip, if she let them glimpse the girl beneath, frightened, fragile, desperate, they would tear her apart. And yet, tonight, something shifted. The music stilled for her, Or perhaps it was only her pulse, quickening, halting, when the ballroom doors opened and silence spread like a contagion. He had arrived. Alexander, Duke of Ashbourne. He did not laugh, did not smile, did not glide on waves of false flattery as the others did. He stood like a storm in human form, tall, broad, and carved of shadows and command. His eyes swept the room with a coldness that burned hotter than fire. Whispers followed him like moths to flame. The Duke, still wearing his grief like armor. They say his wife betrayed him, yes, and he's never forgotten. Evelina should have turned away. She should have let the tide of admiration and fear sweep past her, but something, fate, folly, desperation, rooted her in place. And then his gaze found her. Not a glance, not a casual sweep, but a look so sharp it felt like her very skin was being stripped bare. He did not smile. He did not move, but the weight of his stare pinned her, unraveling every carefully rehearsed pose she had practiced in her mirror. Why her? She lifted her chin, the smallest defiance, though inside her heart thundered with the same fear she carried into every room. Fear that she was nothing more than a painting come to life, admired for her surface, discarded when the illusion cracked. And yet, under the blaze of his unyielding eyes, another question formed in her chest, trembling, dangerous. What if he saw more? The violins rose again, but she could not hear them. The ball spun on, but she could not see it. The only thing that existed in that glittering, suffocating ballroom was the Duke of Ashbourne and his merciless gaze. Her lips parted, though no words came, because in that instant, she knew, whatever this night held, her life would no longer be her own. Would she step into ruin or salvation? If you were Evelina, standing beneath chandeliers while society whispered your ruin, would you marry for love or to save your family's name? The music faltered, and the world collapsed into silence. Evelina had barely drawn breath when a hand, firm, unyielding, closed around her wrist. Dance with me. His voice was a command, not a request, deep, resonant, threaded with something dangerous. Alexander, Duke of Ashbourne, did not wait for her answer. He led her onto the floor, and suddenly, under the blaze of chandeliers and the watchful eyes of London's most merciless gossips, she was trapped in his orbit. Her pulse thundered as he drew her close, not indecently, but close enough that his presence filled her lungs. His touch seared through the silk of her glove, through skin and bone, branding her. "You look terrified," he murmured, eyes locked on hers, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I am not," she lied, forcing her lips into a curve of practiced serenity. His gaze darkened, cutting through her mask as though it were nothing but gauze. "Yes, you are, but you wear it well." The violins surged, sweeping them into the rhythm. She moved as she had been taught, graceful, composed, but inside she was unraveling. No suitor had ever looked at her this way. Not with lust, not with admiration, not even with cruelty. His eyes stripped her bare, demanding truth where she had only ever been allowed to give performance. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely audible as he spun her into the center of the floor. His lips curved, not into a smile, but something sharper. "Because you are the only one here not begging for me." The words sliced through her composure, leaving her breathless. Around them, gasps rippled. Lady Honoria's fans snapped open like a blade. Men stiffened, women whispered. The Duke of Ashbourne, dancing. The Duke of Ashbourne, choosing her. Evelina felt the eyes of the entire ballroom drilling into her, and she hated it. No, not hated, feared it. Every whisper about her father's debts, every cruel laugh about her poverty, would now fuse with this moment, become fuel for scandal. She wanted to pull away, to flee. But his grip was iron, his presence unyielding. and a part of her, frightened, foolish, did not want to run. "Do you always decide without asking?" she said, her voice steadier now, sharpened by anger. "Always," he answered, "and you'll thank me for it." The music ended, a crashing flourish, but he did not release her hand. He held her still, in front of everyone, until silence fell like a blade across the room. Then he spoke, clear, deliberate, cruelly loud enough for all to hear. "Miss Whitcombe, you will take a walk with me." Gasps broke like waves. Ladies pressed their fans to their lips. Men exchanged sharp looks, and Evelina's father froze where he stood, pale as stone. A walk. With the Duke. In view of society. It was a declaration, a challenge, a noose. Her throat tightened. Refuse, and she would humiliate him, humiliate herself. Accept, and she would step into a fire from which she might never emerge. But the Duke's hand was unyielding, his gaze daring her to defy him. "I will," she said, the words burning her tongue. He led her from the ballroom, through double doors, into the night air. The gardens spread before them, silvered by moonlight. The chill kissed her skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy fury vibrating from the man beside her. They walked in silence until the music faded behind them, until whispers became only distant echoes. Then, at last, he released her hand. "Do you know why they whisper about me, Miss Whitcombe?" His voice was low, dangerous. Evelina steadied her breath. "Because your wife betrayed you." A muscle ticked in his jaw. He turned to her, eyes like steel. "They say she broke me. They say I am ruined." She held his gaze, though her stomach knotted. "And are you?" The corner of his mouth lifted, a ghost of something bitter. "No, I am colder, stronger, but I have no use for lies, which is why I chose you." "Chose me?" She laughed, sharp and breathless. "You know nothing about me." "I know enough. You need salvation. I need someone who cannot deceive me. You wear desperation like a veil, and yet you pretend at poise. That makes you dangerous, beautiful, necessary." Her heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. "Necessary for what?" His gaze dropped, then rose again, searing. "A wife." The words struck like a blow. Evelina's breath caught. Marriage. With him. The Duke of Ashbourne, the man society feared and worshipped. "You mock me," she whispered. "I do not waste time with mockery." His voice was flat, merciless. "You will marry me, Evelina, and in return your father's debts will vanish." The world tilted, her vision blurred. All her fears, all her hopes, crashing in one impossible demand. "Why me?" she whispered again, voice trembling. "Because you do not smile when you should," he said, stepping closer, shadows consuming the space between them. "Because you carry sorrow in your eyes, and you do not think I notice. Because unlike them," he jerked his chin toward the ballroom, "you are real, and I will have nothing less." Her breath shuddered. The Duke of Ashbourne wanted her, not for her beauty alone, not for her mask, but for the cracks she had tried to hide. But marriage? To him? A man feared for his cruelty, shrouded in grief, marked by betrayal. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "The creditors will not wait much longer." Her own voice whispered back, "What if he saw more?" The moon hung heavy above, and Evelina's heart hammered with a choice she could not outrun. Would she surrender herself to a man who terrified her in exchange for salvation? Or would she gamble everything, her family's name, their survival, her own heart, on a different kind of ruin? And standing there, in the garden's cold silence, she realized the truth. She had already been claimed. If you were Evelina, bound by duty and trapped by desperation, would you step into the fire of a marriage built on power and shadows? Or would you risk everything to choose your own fate? The kiss seared her like fire meeting dry parchment, unexpected, consuming, and impossible to stop. One moment Evelina stood frozen at the edge of the ballroom, laughter and venomous whispers crashing around her like daggers. The next, the Duke's mouth was on hers, fierce and unyielding, silencing every cruel tongue with a single act of defiance. Gasps tore through the crowd. Fans snapped shut. Wine glasses slipped from stunned fingers and shattered across marble. Evelina's knees nearly gave way, but his hand at the small of her back held her upright, anchoring her to him as though the world had narrowed to this. His lips, his breath, the impossible tenderness hidden beneath the steel of his command. When he pulled away, the ballroom erupted in scandalous murmurs, the sound louder than the orchestra's faltering strings. Evelina's chest rose and fell in sharp bursts, her lips tingling, her entire body aflame with confusion and desire. The Duke of Ashbourne turned, his gaze sweeping the crowd with open challenge. "Whisper if you must," he said, his voice cold enough to cut glass. "But let it be known, I do not parade a trophy. I stand with my wife." Wife! The word struck Evelina harder than the kiss. Heat flooded her face as she stared at him, heart slamming against her ribs. The marriage had been cold, strategic, and transactional. He had sworn never to love again, and she had sworn never to hope. Yet here he was, declaring her his before the world, not with indifference, but with passion that could not be mistaken. Her father swayed where he stood at the edge of the room, relief breaking through the lines of fear etched into his features. The ladies who had mocked her gaped in silence, their venom curdled into disbelief. And Evelina? She trembled, not with humiliation, but with something far more dangerous, longing. The Duke leaned close, his breath grazing her ear, unseen by the crowd. "They will never laugh at you again." She turned her head slightly, voice low, tight. "You presume too much?" "Do I?" His lips curved into a shadow of a smile. "You trembled, Evelina, not from fear, from wanting." Her breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to spit out words sharp enough to sever the spell. But the memory of his kiss lingered, sweet and terrible, and she could not lie. Not to him, not to herself. The orchestra struck up again, but the rhythm was broken. The crowd dispersed into huddled clusters of whispers, but eyes still darted toward them. Evelina's composure, fragile as glass, threatened to shatter beneath the weight of their stares. "Come," Alexander murmured, taking her hand. He did not ask. He never asked. He led her from the floor, through the crowd, past frozen expressions of envy and outrage, until they slipped into the corridor beyond the ballroom. The moment the heavy doors closed, silence wrapped around them. Evelina wrenched her hand free, her voice sharp with fury. "How dare you?" His eyes narrowed. "I saved you. You humiliated me," she shot back, though her lips still tingled, though her pulse betrayed her words. "You used me to make a spectacle." "I silenced them," he countered, stepping closer, his presence pressing against her. "You will not be mocked again. You will be feared, respected, envied. They will not touch you." Her back met the wall, cool plaster against her heated skin. He loomed above her, shadows sharpening the edges of his jaw, his eyes fierce and searching. "You think that is what I want?" she whispered, breath trembling. He tilted his head, studying her. "No, I think you want something far more dangerous." Her stomach tightened, fire and fear colliding in her chest. "I think," he said, voice low, deliberate, "you want me." The words stole her breath. He leaned closer, not touching, not yet, but surrounding her in the intensity of his presence. She could smell the faint spice of his cologne, the warmth of his skin, the promise of something she had sworn never to desire. Her voice broke, raw and trembling. "And what if I do?" For a heartbeat, silence. His jaw clenched, his breath quickened, and the mask of control cracked just enough for her to glimpse the storm beneath. "Then God help us both," he murmured. He turned abruptly, stepping back, breaking the spell. Evelina pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself, every nerve in her body alive with the echo of what nearly happened. "We will return," he said, voice clipped, the Duke restored. "Do not falter. They will watch you now more than ever." And he was gone, striding back toward the ballroom, leaving her breathless, trembling and furious with herself for the longing that clawed at her heart. The whispers did not stop. They transformed. No longer mockery of her poverty, but speculation of passion. Did the Duke love her? Was she the enchantress who had tamed him? Or was she merely a pawn in his cruel game? Everywhere Evelina turned, eyes followed. Her every movement dissected, her every glance twisted into rumor. And through it all, Alexander remained cool, distant, as though the kiss had been nothing more than strategy. But Evelina knew better. She had felt it. The tenderness hidden in steel, the storm behind his restraint, and she hated that she wanted more. Days later, in the quiet of Ashbourne Manor, Evelina found herself walking the long gallery lined with ancestral portraits. Shadows stretched across the painted eyes of dukes and duchesses long dead, watching her, judging her. She paused before a portrait of a woman with sharp cheekbones and cold eyes, the first Duchess of Ashbourne, regal and untouchable. "You'll never be enough for them," the voice startled her. She turned to find Lady Honoria, the Duke's cousin, standing in the doorway, her smile thin as a blade. "What do you mean?" Evelina asked, heart tightening. Honoria stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "You think one kiss erases your family's disgrace? You think Alexander's protection makes you worthy? You are nothing but a convenient mask, and when he tires of you," she leaned in, voice like poison, "you'll be discarded, just as she was." "She?" Evelina whispered. Honoria's smile widened. "His first wife." Evelina's chest constricted. She had heard the whispers, of course, but never the details, the betrayal, the ruin. And now the words sank claws into her. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed down the gallery. Alexander appeared, his gaze flicking from Honoria's sharp smile to Evelina's pale face. "What is this?" he demanded. "Only a conversation," Honoria said sweetly, curtsying before slipping away, her perfume lingering like smoke. Evelina stared at him, her voice brittle. What happened to her? His eyes darkened, jaw tightening. "Do not ask questions you do not want answered." Her throat ached, her heart pounding. "But I do want answers. You speak of lies, of betrayal, yet you hide the truth from me. How am I to trust you if you keep me in shadows?" His silence was heavy, his gaze sharp, as though he weighed every word he might speak. At last he said, "She made me believe in love, then she proved it a weapon." Pain flickered across his face, gone as quickly as it came. Evelina's chest ached at the glimpse of the man beneath the armor, raw and wounded. "I will not be broken again," he said, his voice a blade of steel. Her breath shuddered, torn between fear and compassion. "And I will not be used as a shield." For a long moment they stood in silence, the distance between them deeper than any ocean. Yet beneath it, a current of fire pulled them closer still. That night Evelina lay awake, staring at the canopy above her bed, the Duke's words echoing in her mind. "She made me believe in love. Then she proved it a weapon. Could she risk her heart on a man so determined never to give his own? And yet, her lips still burned with the memory of his kiss. Her soul ached with the weight of wanting. Perhaps love was always a weapon. The question was whether she was strong enough to wield it, or foolish enough to fall upon its blade. If you were Evelina, trapped between desire and fear, between passion and ruin, would you surrender to a love that could destroy you, or guard your heart and risk losing it forever? Her palm stung from the force of her own hand. She had slapped him. Evelina had not meant to, not in the grand dining room, not with servants lingering at the edges pretending not to hear. But the Duke's words had cut so deep, so cold, that her body moved before her mind could stop it. "You think I am weak," she hissed, her voice shaking, her chest heaving. "You think I am nothing but your ornament?" Alexander's jaw tightened, his cheek bearing the mark of her defiance. For a moment, the entire world seemed to still. A spoon clattered against silver somewhere in the corner, then silence closed in, thick as fog. He did not shout. He did not strike back. Instead, he stepped closer, towering over her with quiet fury that burned hotter than any rage. "I think," he said, voice low and lethal, "you are playing a dangerous game." "And what if I am?" Evelina shot back, though her hand trembled where it still hovered in the air, though her heart thundered so loudly she feared he could hear it. "At least then I am more than a doll on your arm." The Duke's gaze dropped briefly to her trembling fingers, then returned to her face, unreadable, intense. Slowly, he reached out, caught her wrist, and lowered her hand to her side. His touch was gentle, too gentle, almost reverent. "You burn," he murmured, so low only she could hear, "and I do not know if you will set me free or destroy me." Her breath faltered, her body betraying her resolve. She wanted to pull away, to hold on to her anger, but his words lodged themselves deep inside her chest like shards of glass. Then, without another word, he released her, turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the echo of her own fury, shaken, breathless, and aching with something far more dangerous than rage. The days that followed shifted like a storm rolling across the estate, unpredictable, heavy and charged with unspoken electricity. Evelina found herself caught between moments of closeness and chasms of distance. One morning, she discovered him in the stables, sleeves rolled, hands steady as he tended to his horse's bridle. She should have walked past, ignored him, let silence widen the gulf between them. Instead, she found herself lingering. "You do that yourself?" she asked, surprising herself with the softness of her voice. He did not glance up. A man should know how to handle what he commands. The words should have sounded arrogant, but there was a shadow in them, a weariness she could not name. She stepped closer, fingertips brushing over the polished wood of the stable door. "And yet, you let no one handle you." At that, he did look at her, eyes sharp, piercing. For a heartbeat, she thought he might snap, retreat behind that wall of ice he wore like armor. Instead, he smirked, faint, humorless. "Would you try?" Her pulse skipped. She should have laughed, dismissed it. Instead, she stepped into the stall, her skirts brushing straw, her heart hammering. The horse shifted, stamping once, as though sensing the storm between them. She reached for the bridle strap, her hand brushing his. The contact was brief, accidental, but her skin tingled as though struck by lightning. His eyes darkened, but he did not move away. The silence stretched, and then, too quickly, he let go, stepping back. "Be careful, Evelina. You think I am cold because I do not bend, but ice shatters when struck too hard." She swallowed, throat dry, her chest aching with the weight of words unsaid. Later that week, she found herself at the pianoforte in the music room, her fingers trembling as they danced across ivory keys. It had been years since she played, not since her mother's passing, when melodies had felt too heavy, too full of ghosts. But tonight, the house was too quiet, her heart too loud. She needed something, anything, to remind her she was still alive. The notes were clumsy at first, then steadier, then blooming into a melody that made her throat ache. She closed her eyes, let herself fall into it, until the sound was not music but memory. "You play as if every note is a confession," Alexander's voice said. Her eyes flew open. He stood in the doorway, shadowed by candlelight, his face unreadable. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "I didn't know anyone was listening." "You would not have played if you had," he replied, stepping into the room. She turned back to the keys, forcing her fingers to move again, though her heart now thudded with every chord. "Do you disapprove?" "No." His voice softened, unexpected. "I have not heard the house sound like this in years." He moved closer, then sat beside her on the bench, the air between them charged, her skin prickling with awareness. His hand brushed the keys, producing a single note that hung in the air like a secret. "Show me," he said. And so she did. She played, slower this time, guiding his hand to the right chords, her fingers overlapping his. Each touch sparked, each accidental brush lingered. At one point their hands pressed together, both holding the same note, and neither moved. When the music faded, the silence that followed was unbearable. She turned her head, too quickly, and found his face inches from hers. His gaze dropped to her lips, just for a fraction, just long enough for her heart to stumble. But then he stood, sudden, sharp, retreating once again. Enough. And he left, leaving her trembling, tears threatening at the edges of her eyes. The world outside their fragile cocoon was not kind. At the next gathering they attended, whispers followed Evelina like gnats. "She is nothing but a pretty mask," one lady whispered, loud enough to sting. "A duchess with no dowry," another sneered. Lady Honoria, of course, fanned the fire. With a smile sharpened like glass, she leaned near a circle of guests and murmured, "Poor thing. The Duke must grow bored already. One cannot live forever on beauty alone." Evelina's hands curled into fists, but she forced her face into composure. She had learned the art of survival through silence, through smiles that did not reach her eyes. Yet tonight, the words pierced deeper, because she was beginning to believe them herself. That night, back in Ashbourne Manor, she wandered the halls restless, sleepless. In a forgotten drawer of the library desk, she found it, a folded letter, sealed but never sent. Her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting. Delicate, feminine. The letter was addressed to Alexander. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest, forgive me. I cannot remain bound to chains of duty when my heart belongs elsewhere. He sees me. He cherishes me. You will never understand what it is to love without restraint." Evelina's stomach twisted. The words blurred as her eyes stung with tears. This was his late wife's letter. Evidence not of love, but betrayal. So this was why he was cold, why he distrusted beauty, why he looked at her sometimes as though she were both salvation and threat. Her chest ached. If he had been destroyed once, what hope did she have to be more than a shadow of another wound? When Alexander found her hours later, the letter still clutched in her trembling hands, his expression darkened. "You should not have touched that," he said. Her voice broke. "I had to know. You tell me nothing, you hide everything, and yet you expect me to trust you." He stepped closer, his face fierce, raw. "You want the truth?" "She broke me. She took what was sacred and made it filth. She made me believe in love, then proved it was nothing but a lie. And now—" His voice cracked, low and dangerous. "Now you stand before me, looking like temptation itself, and I cannot decide whether you will save me or destroy me all over again." Her tears spilled, hot down her cheeks. "And if I destroy you," she whispered. His breath caught. He lifted a hand, hovered it near her face, then dropped it, unable to touch. "Then I will burn," he said, "and gladly." But then he turned, retreating into shadow once more, leaving her broken, trembling, and more in love than she dared admit. The walls of their marriage shifted, fragile, trembling, every secret and every touch another crack in the foundation. Evelina could no longer deny the truth growing inside her. She loved him, desperately, dangerously, hopelessly. But he would never trust her, not with his heart. And that, more than any whisper of society, was the wound that might undo her. Under the golden chandeliers of the Ashford estate, Evelina's laughter died in her throat. A hand, uninvited, possessive, closed around her wrist, drawing her away from the crowded drawing room where polite applause still echoed after her performance on the pianoforte. She turned, pulse spiking, and found herself staring into the hungry smile of Lord Ashford. "You play divinely, Lady Evelina," he murmured, his grip tightening as though she were already his prize. "But I wonder, do you shine as brightly in private as you do beneath society's gaze?" Her breath caught, fury and dread tangling in her chest. Around them conversation swirled, but none seemed to notice that the lion had cornered its prey. She tried to pull back, but his thumb stroked the delicate skin at her wrist in a mockery of tenderness. "Release me, my lord," she hissed, keeping her voice low. The scandal of a raised tone would only fuel his advantage. Lord Ashford leaned closer, the scent of brandy clinging to his breath. "Come now, your aunt has spoken of your precarious circumstances. Do you think you can afford to spurn me?" The mention of Lady Honoria sliced deeper than his grip. Evelina's aunt, the woman who should have shielded her, had instead sold her vulnerability into his hands. From across the room, her husband, the Duke of Hawthorne, watched, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met. Something primal surged through her, a plea, a challenge, a silent cry of possession. The Duke moved. Later that night, when the last carriage wheels faded into the fog, Evelina pressed trembling fingers against the carved balustrade of the Duke's library balcony. The cool night air failed to steady her. Behind her, the door clicked shut. "Why did you not cry out?" The Duke's voice was low, edged with restrained violence. Evelina turned, her throat tight. "Because the moment I did, the scandal would have been mine, not his." His jaw tightened. "Ashford thrives on shadows. He will twist every whisper until you are painted desperate." He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking like a breath drawn too long. "I will not allow him to corner you again." For the first time, Evelina saw his anger not as cold armor, but as heat, for her, for them. And though her body trembled from Ashford's touch, another tremor stirred beneath it. Desire, dangerous and sweet. Her lips parted. She wanted to tell him everything, that the whispers, the debts, her aunt's betrayal were drowning her. But the words locked in her chest. If she confessed, would he see her strength or her ruin? Instead, she whispered, "And what if it is not Ashford who corners me, but you?" The silence that followed was alive, charged, broken only when he reached for her hand, gentle where Ashford had been cruel, reverent where others demanded. His thumb traced the wrist still marked by another man's hold. "Then may you never need to run," he said. The days that followed blurred into stolen moments. Letters, written in hurried hands, and slipped into the hollow of a book on the Duke's desk, carried truths they dared not speak aloud. Evelina's words trembled with longing and fear. His replies burned with restrained devotion, always signed not with his title, but with his name, Alexander. In the gardens, a brush of hands as they turned a page of poetry lingered longer than propriety allowed. At supper, a glance held across the table spoke more than conversation ever could. In the quiet of evening, when servants extinguished candles and left them alone in the half-dark, silence itself became dangerous, filled with the ache of unsaid confessions. But society was a beast with 1,000 eyes, and it was not blind. Whispers spread faster than candlelight catching lace. Evelina had heard them in drawing rooms, felt them in the sharp turn of heads when she entered a hall. Bought with beauty, paid with nothing. An empty purse, but a clever climb. She is no duchess, only a painted doll. At first, she tried to bear it with grace, yet each rumor coiled tighter, each laugh at her expense sharper. And worst of all, she saw Ashford feeding the flames, his smile sly, his compliments pointed, always delivered loud enough to wound. One evening, after a dinner party where Lady Honoria had practically paraded her before him, Evelina confronted her aunt in the dim corridor outside her chambers. "You feed him to me like scraps to a hound," Evelina spat, trembling with rage. Lady Honoria's fan snapped closed. "And what would you prefer, child? Love? Dreams? You have no dowry, no fortune. The Duke tolerates you because you are beautiful, nothing more. Secure your future while you still can, or lose everything when his interest wanes." Evelina's nails dug into her palms. "You think me so weak?" "I think you foolish," Honoria replied coolly. "Ashford will make you safe. That man you wed out of convenience, he will never give you his heart." But Evelina already had Alexander's letters pressed to her breast, their ink etched into her soul. The tension broke weeks later at another grand ball. Evelina stood alone, the silk of her gown whispering as she moved through the crush of dancers. Laughter pricked at her ears. Too fine a dress for an empty purse. Did you see how Ashford follows her like a hound? She clings to the Duke's name as though it were hers to keep. Her vision blurred. She could not breathe beneath the weight of it all. Then Alexander's voice cut through the crowd. "Enough." He stood at her side, his presence towering, his eyes fixed on the circle of whispering mouths. In that moment, every guest in the room froze, and then, as though daring the world itself, he took Evelina into his arms. The music faltered, the dancers stilled, but he did not stop. His lips found hers in a kiss so fierce, so tender, it silenced the cruel laughter. It was not a performance, not a duty, not a convenience. It was claim, confession, and vow all at once. The crowd gasped. Lady Honoria's fan slipped from her hand. Lord Ashford's smile cracked, and Evelina, dizzy and breathless, realized her choice was no longer between love and duty. It was between survival as others dictated, or the dangerous, consuming freedom of her own heart. But freedom came at a cost. That night, Evelina found another letter slipped beneath her door, not from Alexander, but from Ashford. "I warned you, my lady. You are a prize I will have, one way or another. If not by your choice, then by ruin. The Duke cannot shield you forever." Her hand shook as she read the final line, the ink pressed deep into the paper as though carved with malice. "Your secret is no longer yours to keep." The candle guttered, the shadows seemed to breathe, and Evelina knew. Part of her heart was claimed, but part of her soul was now in the crosshairs of a man who would not rest until he broke her. The letter burned, not in flame but in Evelina's hand, its words searing into her skin as though branded. "Your secret is no longer yours to keep." She had read it once, twice, a dozen times, yet still the ink seemed to crawl, each stroke of Lord Ashford's pen, a coil tightening around her throat. The candle at her bedside hissed and guttered in the draught, plunging her chamber into sudden darkness. Evelina's breath caught. Someone had opened the window. She spun, heart hammering, skirt swishing across the polished floorboards, only to find the night air streaming in, cold and merciless. On the sill, a single black feather rested like a warning. She stumbled back, the letter crumpling in her grip. Ashford had been here, or worse, someone in his employ. He had breached the sanctity of her room, her most private refuge. Now there was no space untouched by his shadow. The door slammed open. "Evelina." It was Alexander. His presence filled the chamber, dark hair damp from the storm, eyes like steel catching firelight. Relief broke through her terror, relief and shame. She had wanted to shield him from her ruin, but Ashford had forced her hand. He saw the letter instantly. "Give it to me." Her fingers clutched tighter, as if by holding it she could somehow contain the threat. "No. If you read it, the words become real. If I know, I can fight." His voice was hard, but beneath it lay something raw, something unguarded. He stepped forward, slowly, as though taming a frightened doe. "Evelina, trust me." Her breath trembled out. She placed the crumpled letter into his waiting hand. Silence stretched as he read. The candle sputtered back to life, illuminating the tightening of his jaw, the storm building behind his eyes. When he finally looked up, it was not with the icy detachment of a duke, but the blazing fury of a man betrayed. "He dares," Alexander whispered. "He dares to threaten you under my roof." He crushed the paper in his fist, the veins in his forearm standing taut. "This ends tonight." At dawn, the Duke's carriage thundered through the mist toward Ashford's estate. Evelina sat rigid beside him, hands clasped to hide their trembling. Alexander had refused her pleas to stay behind, insisting her presence was necessary. "He feeds on silence," he told her. "He will not twist this into your shame. If there is to be a reckoning, it will be mine, and yours together." Ashford greeted them in his marble-pillared hall, with all the charm of a snake basking in sunlight. "Your Grace," he drawled, bowing with mockery rather than respect. "And my Lady Duchess, what an unexpected delight." "Enough," Alexander snarled, shoving the crumpled letter into his chest. "Explain yourself." Ashford smoothed the paper, his smile thin. "Oh, that? Merely an observation. The Duchess has secrets, fragile things, so easily shattered if one isn't careful where they tread." His gaze slid to Evelina, lingering like a touch she could not scrub away. "Isn't that right?" Her nails bit into her palms. "You would ruin me for sport?" "For sport?" Ashford chuckled. "No, my lady. For justice. You see, the Duke parades you as though you were born for such a role. But I know better. I know of debts, unpaid and festering. I know of a dowry that never existed. I know what you hide." Alexander's fist slammed onto the marble table, rattling goblets. "Say it again, and I will strike you where you stand." Ashford's grin widened. "And prove me right before the eyes of society? No, Your Grace, you'll do nothing, because if you silence me, the silence itself will speak." The battle shifted in drawing rooms and ballrooms. Ashford never accused Evelina outright. He was too cunning for that. Instead, he let insinuation drip like poison into every ear. A glance here, a smirk there, a carefully dropped half-sentence. Soon, invitations grew fewer. Ladies who once fawned over Evelina now averted their eyes. The whispers grew louder. Her father's debts. Not a penny to her name. Why else would Hawthorne wed her so quickly? Evelina felt the walls close in. At night, Alexander held her, their secret letters now abandoned for whispered vows in the dark. But by day, the distance between them grew, forged by the weight of a society ready to devour them both. It was Lady Honoria who twisted the knife. "You see, child," her aunt said coolly as they walked the gallery of portraits. "I warned you. Ashford could have secured you, protected you, but you chose a man who, for all his title, cannot shield you from whispers. You fed me to him like meat," Evelina spat. Honoria's lips curved in a cold smile. "I secured survival. You mistake cruelty for carelessness. When Hawthorne tires of defending your empty name, what will you have left?" But Evelina saw through her now. Honoria had wagered everything on Ashford, hoping to rise with him. Evelina was merely the coin tossed into the gamble. The breaking point came at Lady Willoughby's masquerade. Beneath 100 glittering masks, Evelina tried to lose herself in anonymity. Yet even disguised, she felt the sting of stares, the rustle of gossip chasing her like shadows. Alexander stayed close, his hand firm at her back, but she felt his restraint, his fury coiled tight. Then Ashford struck. He approached unmasked, arrogance gleaming, and bowed low before Evelina. "My lady," he said, voice loud enough to hush the music, "will you honor me with a dance? Or does your husband fear what truths might be whispered if you do? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evelina's heart slammed against her ribs. To refuse would feed the rumor. To accept would tether her to his game. Before she could answer, Alexander stepped forward, his mask glinting under candlelight. You mistake her silence for submission. It is dignity. He pulled Evelina into his arms, claiming the floor before Ashford could move. The music swelled. Their dance was fire, his hand at her waist, hers at his shoulder, every step defiant. Around them, society's eyes watched, hungry for scandal, but the Duke's gaze never left hers. You are mine, he whispered as they turned, not as possession but as truth. No man will strip that from us. Tears stung her eyes. Then let me fight too, Alexander. Do not bear this alone. In that moment, something shifted. The walls between them, built of duty and silence, cracked. For the first time, he let her see the wound he carried, the betrayal of his first wife, the vow he had sworn never to love again. And for the first time, she showed him the depth of her fear, her shame, her desperate hope. They danced not as strangers bound by contract, but as equals bound by choice. And Ashford, watching from the edge of the floor, saw the tide turning against him. His smile thinned, sharpened. If whispers could not destroy them, he would find another way. That night, a servant delivered a sealed note to Evelina's chamber. No name, only a crest, Ashford's. Her hands shook as she broke the wax. Inside, a single line waited. Tomorrow your father's debts will be revealed before Parliament. When the scandal breaks, not even Hawthorne's name will save you. Beneath it, a second slip of paper, a copy of her father's ledger, damning and undeniable. The room tilted, her lungs seized. If Ashford succeeded, it would not be only her reputation at stake, but Alexander's estate, his standing, everything he had fought to preserve. Evelina pressed the paper to her chest, whispering into the dark, I will not let him destroy you. And in that vow, her choice crystallized. Love over survival, truth over silence. Tomorrow she would face Ashford. Tomorrow she would risk ruin to protect the man who had become her heart. The scream tore through the House of Lords. Not a cry of fear, but of outrage. The sound of a duchess slamming open the chamber doors. Evelina stood framed in the archway, pale gown trembling with each ragged breath, her eyes blazing against the tide of wigs and powdered faces turning toward her. In her clenched fist, she held her father's ledger, damning proof inked across its yellowed pages. Gasps rippled. A woman here? A duchess uninvited? It was scandal, sacrilege, unthinkable. Yet she stepped forward, each heel striking the marble like a drumbeat. Enough of whispers, she said, her voice clear as glass breaking. If Lord Ashford would ruin me, let him do so while I stand before you all, unmasked, unafraid. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Across the floor, Ashford rose slowly, a predator smiling at the stag that had walked into his jaws. His bow was mockery. Ah, Lady Hawthorne, how brave of you to bring your shame into daylight. Evelina lifted the ledger high. This is not my shame. This is yours. The night before had been agony. She had sat in her chamber, the ledger open before her like a beast's mouth, every line of her father's debts threatening to consume her. She had nearly burned it, nearly buried it. But then she saw Alexander, sitting alone in his study, head bowed, the weight of centuries of Hawthorne pride pressing upon his shoulders. He did not know she watched him. He thought himself alone. That was when Evelina understood. Love was not delicate. It was not roses and lace. It was fire, dangerous and consuming, the kind that demanded risk, and she would risk everything. Now, before Parliament, her voice rang out. You all know my name. You know the Duke's. You know the whispers circling since the day of our marriage. Let me strip them bare. Yes, my father's debts are real. Yes, my dowry was a ghost. I entered this union with nothing but a family name hanging by a thread. Gasps. Snickers. Ashford's smile widened. But, she continued, slamming the ledger onto the oak table, what Lord Ashford fails to mention is why he guards these accounts so closely. Because the ink within ties not only to my father, but to his own family, to loans crafted as snares, interest bled like leeches, designed to ruin the desperate. He is no creditor, he is a vulture. Faces blanched. Lords shifted uneasily. Ashford's mask cracked for the first time. You insolent, he began. Do not call me insolent, Evelina cut in, her voice sharp enough to slice. Call me what I am, a wife who will not see her husband's name dragged through filth, a daughter who will not let her father's ruin be used as a weapon, a woman who refuses to bow to men who mistake cruelty for power. The silence that followed was thunderous. Evelina's heart pounded so loudly she thought the entire chamber must hear it, but she held her ground. Then, at last, Alexander moved. He had stood frozen at first, caught between fury and fear, watching the woman he loved fling herself into fire. But now he stepped forward, every inch the Duke of Ashbourne, his voice low but commanding. You think to shame her, he said, eyes locked on Ashford. You think her courage weakness? Let the record show, let all of England know, that this woman is more Duke than half the men who sit here posturing. And she is mine, not ornament, not shield. Mine, because she chose me when the world gave her nothing. He took Evelina's hand, raising it before them all. If you would disgrace her, you disgrace me. If you would silence her, you silence me, and I will not be silenced. The chamber dissolved into chaos. Some shouted for order, others demanded inquiry, still others muttered of scandal, but none could erase the sight burned into their minds, a duchess defying ruin, and a duke declaring love without shame. Ashford's face darkened. His bow was gone, replaced by naked fury. He lunged for the ledger, but Alexander intercepted, shoving him back with a force that rattled benches. You've played your last game, Ashford, he growled. Parliament will have its inquiry, and when they see the rot in your accounts, you will be the one begging for mercy. Ashford spat. You will regret crossing me. Alexander's grip on Evelina's hand tightened. No, I regret only that I did not burn you to ash sooner. That night, London burned with talk. Some called Evelina reckless, others hailed her as brave. But in the hawthorn carriage, silence reigned, thick, heavy, trembling with unspoken words. At last Alexander broke it. You could have destroyed us both. I know, Evelina whispered. You could have lost everything, your name, your place, your safety. I know. He turned to her then, eyes shadowed with something raw. Why? Her breath hitched. Because I love you. It was the first time she had spoken it aloud. The words hung in the air like lightning, impossible to recall once unleashed. Alexander's jaw clenched. He looked away as though the truth burned too bright. Evelina. She leaned forward, desperate. You think me a fool that I cannot see your scars. But love is not blindness. It is sight, clearer than any mirror. I see you, all of you, and I will not leave you to face this alone. For a heartbeat, silence stretched, the carriage rocking through moonlit streets. Then Alexander's hand found her cheek, trembling. His lips brushed hers, tentative, reverent, as though kissing her was an oath. When he drew back, his voice was hoarse. God help me. I love you too. But love was no shield against danger. Ashford struck back with venom. Within days, scandal sheets bloomed with tales of Evelina's supposed deceit, her family's ruin, whispers of illegitimacy conjured from thin air. At soirée, fans fluttered to hide mocking smiles. In the park, matrons turned their carriages away. And then came the duel challenge. Ashford delivered it publicly, forcing Alexander's hand. "At dawn," he declared, "we settle this as men. If you will not yield your wife's honor, then you will bleed for it." Evelina's blood froze. "You cannot," she begged Alexander. "He means to kill you." "I cannot refuse," Alexander said grimly. "To decline would brand us both cowards, and you would bear that shame more than I." She seized his coat, tears spilling hot. "I would rather shame than widowhood." But his arms encircled her, pulling her against his chest. "And I would rather death than see him breathe another day free. Trust me, Evelina. Trust me one last time." The duel ground lay damp with morning fog. Pistols gleamed, primed. Witnesses stood solemn, their breath white in the cold. Evelina, forbidden to attend, stood hidden among the trees, every nerve screaming. 10 paces, the marshal called. Alexander's back was straight, each stride measured. Ashford's sneer never faltered. They turned, they raised. The shots cracked as one, smoke billowed, blinding her. Evelina's scream tore loose, echoing through the fog. And when it cleared, Alexander still stood. Ashford staggered, crimson blooming across his shoulder. His pistol clattered to the ground. "Mercy," he gasped. Alexander lowered his weapon. "You will find none here, but Parliament will have it, and when they do, you will beg for death." That night, Evelina clung to him as though he might vanish. His shirt was still damp with sweat, his hands still faintly trembling, but his gaze was steady. "It is over," he whispered into her hair. But Evelina knew better. Ashford was wounded, not defeated. A cornered beast was most dangerous, and the war was not yet won. Days later, the Hawthorne Ball was held, as tradition demanded. Candles blazed, violins soared. Society gathered to see if the Duchess and Duke would rise or crumble. Evelina entered on Alexander's arm, her chin high though her heart thundered. Every eye turned, every whisper hung. This was their trial by fire. Ashford arrived too, pale and bandaged, but smirking still. He bowed mockingly. "Enjoy your moment, my lady. It will not last." But Evelina met his gaze unflinching. "You are wrong, my lord. It has only just begun." And as Alexander led her to the center of the floor, as the first notes of the waltz began, she knew the war's climax loomed. Love had been confessed, courage had been tested, now came destiny, and Ashford would not fall quietly. The hush fell like a blade through the ballroom. Evelina froze, every breath stolen from her lungs as dozens of eyes turned toward the half-open doors of the side chamber. Inside, her hand still rested on the Duke's chest, his arm curved protectively about her waist. What had begun as a stolen moment of whispered comfort, his words brushing against her temple, his thumb grazing the silk at her hip, was now their ruin. Gasps rippled outward like wildfire. Fans snapped open, gentlemen stiffened, and voices rose, scandal spilling through the crowd faster than she could draw air. Honoria's triumphant smile glimmered in the doorway, her arm linked possessively with Lord Ashford's. "My word," Honoria purred loud enough for all to hear. "What an intimate little scene." Ashford's voice carried like a poisoned dagger. "The Duchess, it seems, requires rather more comfort than propriety allows." The Duke stiffened beside Evelina, fury coiling in every line of his body. But it was too late. They had been seen, trapped, exposed, humiliated before half of London. Evelina's heart thundered. The whispers crashed in waves. "Compromised. Shameless." Just as I suspected. Her hands trembled where they pressed against the Duke's chest, yet he did not release her. Instead, he turned slowly, deliberately, as if to shield her from the eyes that devoured them. His voice, low and controlled, sliced through the venomous murmurs. "You mistake devotion for scandal, my lord," he said coldly to Ashford. "But then, You are accustomed to confusing envy with truth. A ripple of shock. Ashford's jaw tightened, but Honoria only tilted her head, feigning innocence. Devotion? She echoed sweetly. What a curious word for such proximity. The Duke's hand tightened at Evelina's waist, a silent vow. But she knew what this meant. A duchess, caught in a chamber with her husband. It should not have been scandal. It should have been nothing. Yet because of the venom they had sown, because of Honoria's whispers and Ashford's ambition, this moment of tenderness had been transformed into ruin. Evelina's cheeks burned, shame and fury warring within her. She should step back. She should deny. She should protect him from the consequences of her weakness. But his gaze dropped to hers, steady, unflinching. Stand tall, he murmured so softly only she could hear. They will not break you. The Duke drew her forward into the ballroom itself. Gasps redoubled. Her hand trembled in his, but he held her as if to anchor them both. Ladies, gentlemen, he said, voice commanding the hush. You may speculate, but know this. My Duchess has nothing to fear from shadows and gossip. She is mine, and I will not see her name sullied for your amusement. His declaration landed like thunder, but Evelina knew the damage was done. She could see it in the sidelong glances, the narrowed eyes, the smirks carefully hidden behind fans. Society would not forgive her so easily. And in that moment, as she caught Honoria's gleam of triumph and Ashford's calculating stare, Evelina realized the trap was only tightening. That night, whispers spread across Mayfair like ink through water. By morning, scandal sheets carried clever, cutting lines. The Duchess caught in intimate indiscretion. Are the Duke's affections truly so mercurial? Honoria Grantham, witness to a most delicate scene. One cannot help but wonder. The paper shook in Evelina's hands as she sat alone in her chamber. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for him. His reputation was ironclad, but already she feared the cracks they would seize upon. They would say he had chosen poorly, that she was unworthy, that his judgment was flawed. And yet, beneath the ache, something else stirred. She remembered the fire in his voice, the steel in his stance as he defended her. He had chosen to claim her, not deny her. When the Duke entered her chamber without ceremony, Evelina rose, startled. He crossed to her with purposeful strides, shutting the door firmly behind him. You should not be seen here, she whispered. They already believe the worst, he replied grimly. I'll not waste breath pretending otherwise. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. It is my fault. I should never have lingered in that chamber. Do not, he interrupted, voice sharp. He caught her chin, lifting her eyes to his. Do not blame yourself for what they engineered. Do you think I cannot see Honoria's hand in this? Or Ashford's? The intensity in his gaze stole her breath. They wish to drive a wedge between us, he continued, softer now. They think I will cast you aside to preserve my pride. His thumb brushed across her cheek, tender, reverent. They underestimate me. Her throat ached. She wanted to believe him, yet fear clawed at her heart. But the scandal, your name. My name is nothing without honor, he said fiercely, and my honor lies in standing with you. His lips brushed hers before she could answer, gentle, aching, a kiss that burned away doubt. Evelina melted against him, her heart breaking open with longing. For the first time she did not hold back. But the world would not wait for love. The following day, Ashford called on her father under the guise of friendship. Evelina overheard the conversation from the stairwell, his voice smooth, poisonous. Surely, sir, you must see the danger. Your daughter's indiscretions threaten more than her own reputation. The Duke's fortunes are vast, but whispers can topple even the mightiest. Imagine if creditors begin to question, or if Parliament grows uneasy with his influence. A well-placed word could unravel much. Her father's stammered replies burned her ears. Ashford pressed on, There is, of course, a solution, a quiet annulment. The Duchess returns to you, her family restored, and the Duke, free to make a more suitable match, one without debt, without scandal. Evelina's blood ran cold. That evening she confided in the Duke. "They mean to destroy us," she whispered, pacing the length of his study. "Honoria with her whispers, Ashford with his schemes. My father is weak, he may be swayed, and if society turns its full force upon us—" The Duke watched her, silent, his jaw set. "Perhaps," she choked, "perhaps it would be better for you if we dissolved the marriage. If I stepped aside—" He was on his feet before she could finish, grasping her shoulders with fierce hands. "Do not ever suggest such a thing again." Tears stung her eyes. "But your power, your legacy—" "Damn my legacy," he growled. "Evelina, I have lost once to betrayal. I will not lose again to fear. They may tear at us, but they cannot unmake what we are becoming." Her breath caught. "And what are we becoming?" His forehead pressed to hers, his voice rough. "Everything." Their bond grew in the stolen moments they could seize. A secret letter slipped beneath her chamber door, his handwriting fierce with desire and loyalty. "You are not a shadow to be hidden, Evelina. You are the fire that consumes the lies about us." A brush of hands beneath the table at a dinner party, a whispered vow in the carriage returning home, the searing heat of his gaze across a crowded room. Each moment stitched them closer together, even as society tried to pull them apart. Yet the more their intimacy deepened, the more ruthless Honoria became. At a glittering soirée, Honoria cornered Evelina, her smile sharp as glass. "You believe he loves you now, do you?" she whispered. "But men like him do not love forever. You are a pretty diversion, nothing more. When the scandal has soured, he will discard you, and you will have nothing." Evelina stiffened, but Honoria leaned closer. "Do not imagine you can outwit me. Ashford and I will see you undone. The question is only when." The pressure mounted, each day tighter than the last. Evelina knew she could not remain passive. If she did, Ashford and Honoria would crush them both. She began to gather fragments of truth, overhearing whispers, coaxing confidences, piecing together their schemes. And then, at the height of the season, at a grand masquerade ball, a revelation struck like lightning. Evelina discovered that Ashford was not merely scheming for her ruin. He sought to bind Honoria to him through marriage, and with her fortune and his ambition, they meant to challenge the Duke's influence in Parliament itself. Their attack on Evelina was only the first move in a much greater game. She told the Duke that night, breathless and afraid, "It is not just us they mean to destroy. It is everything you stand for, your allies, your work in Parliament, even your estate." His hand clenched around hers, eyes burning. "Then it is war they want, and war they shall have." But Evelina felt the weight settle upon her shoulders. If she fought, if she chose him fully, she would not merely be risking scandal. She would be wagering their very survival against two enemies who thrived on deception. The night closed with a promise. The Duke kissed her hand, his voice low and resolute. "Evelina, they have cornered us before, but they forget we are stronger together. Whatever comes next, you must trust me, trust us." She nodded, though fear twisted within her. She had chosen love, but the price of that choice was climbing higher by the day. And as she lay awake, she could not shake the dread that Honoria and Ashford were preparing their most devastating move yet. What would you have done if the world demanded you betray the only man who had ever truly seen you? Would you have stood, as Evelina did, with trembling hands and a fierce heart, knowing the storm was yet to come? For as the candles burned low that night, the trap had already been set, and the next scandal would not merely wound, it would seek to destroy. Silence shattered in an instant. One cruel laugh sliced through the ballroom like a blade. Evelina froze mid-step, her gloved hand trembling against the stem of her champagne glass. Then came the words, sharp, deliberate, meant for every ear. She has no dowry, not a penny. The Duke of Ashbourne married nothing but a pretty face. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Conversations died. Heads turned, necks craned. Evelina's breath lodged in her throat. The chandeliers above glittered mercilessly, casting her in a pitiless light. For a moment, she could not move, could not even blink, as if the entire glittering assembly waited to see if she would break. Her cheeks burned, her heart thundered. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the velvet draperies, but the laughter swelled again, this time louder, crueler, coming from a cluster of ladies with painted lips and daggered eyes, and at the center, Lady Honoria, triumphant, her smile venomous. "Ornament of Ashbourne," Honoria said, loud enough for all. "How perfectly useless!" The room erupted. Whispers slithered like snakes across marble floors. Evelina could feel each word coil around her throat. Penniless, fraud, ornament. And where was Alexander? She searched the sea of black coats and jewel-bright gowns. He stood across the ballroom, stiff, jaw set, unreadable. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the storm, rage, betrayal, and something she could not name. He had promised protection. But in this moment, he said nothing. Her knees nearly buckled, yet pride forced her spine straight. Her father's creditors, her sister's future, her very dignity. If she collapsed now, she lost everything. Still inside, she was splintering. "Move aside," a man's voice cut through the crowd. Lord Ashford emerged, smirking, savoring the spectacle. He bowed mockingly before Evelina. "My lady, forgive the intrusion, but perhaps you'd prefer a gentleman who does not value women merely as decoration? Or perhaps one who is not deceived so easily?" A roar of amusement rose from the crowd. Ashford's words struck deeper than Honoria's. They echoed Alexander's own doubts, the fear he had never shed, that beauty deceived, that trust was a fool's game. The room tilted. Evelina gripped her glass harder, but it slipped, shattering against the marble. Shards sparkled like cruel stars at her feet. A hush fell again, sharp, expectant. She could run. She could crumble. She could let the mask fall at last. Instead, Evelina lifted her chin. Her voice, though trembling, carried across the hall. "Yes," she said. "It is true I brought no dowry to this marriage, only myself." The silence thickened, then sharpened into scornful murmurs. Her heart hammered, but she pressed on. "But I will not apologize for it. My worth was never measured in gold." Gasps, disbelief, even outrage. No woman of her station dared speak so boldly. Her gaze found Alexander's again. This time she did not beg for rescue. She wanted him to see her truth, even if it shattered everything. Honoria's fan snapped shut like a weapon. How touching. Yet without wealth, without position, you are nothing. You will drag the Duke into ruin, just as your father has sunk into debt. Evelina stiffened. How did she know? How had her family's secret bled into society's mouth? Ashford's chuckle answered the question. Some truths cannot stay buried, not when reputations are at stake. The world swayed. Evelina's father's ruin, her family's disgrace, all paraded here like entertainment. Shame clawed at her throat. But then came another sound, boots striking marble, steady, deliberate. Alexander moved. He crossed the ballroom, cutting through whispers like a blade through silk. The crowd parted, hushed by the sheer force of his presence. His gaze never left Evelina's. When he reached her, he stopped, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough that her trembling eased. Without looking away from her, he spoke. Enough. The word cracked like thunder. The hush deepened. Even Honoria faltered. Alexander turned, sweeping the crowd with a stare that could freeze blood. Yes, Lady Evelina had no dowry. She never pretended otherwise. That was my choice, my decision. And you dare mock her for my decision? His voice rose, cold and commanding. You call her an ornament? You fools! You blind, whispering cowards! She is the very strength that holds Ashbourne together. Murmurs surged, half disbelief, half awe. Evelina's pulse raced. He was defending her, not for appearances, not with a kiss of convenience, but with fire. Alexander reached for her hand. His fingers closed over hers, warm, grounding. From the moment I married Evelina, she carried burdens no man here would dare shoulder. She has faced your cruelty, your malice, and yet she stands. Tell me, which of you has such courage? Gasps. A ripple of shame across jeweled faces. Honoria's lips curled. Lovely speech, your grace. Yet speeches do not erase truth. She is still nothing. Alexander's laugh was low, dangerous. Nothing? Then witness her now. He looked at Evelina, not the crowd. His voice softened, though every word still carried. You are not my ornament. You are my equal, my partner, my heart. And I will never, never allow anyone to diminish you again. Before she could breathe, he drew her into his arms and kissed her. Not the searing performance of before, but something deeper, rawer. A vow, a surrender, a claim of love that left no doubt. The ballroom erupted, gasps, protests, applause. But Evelina heard nothing but the roar of her own heartbeat, the press of his lips, the truth at last. When he drew back, his forehead rested against hers. I love you, Evelina, he whispered. Not despite your secrets, but because you had the courage to face them. You are everything. Tears burned her eyes, the words she thought she'd never hear, spoken here, before all who had mocked her. I love you too, she whispered. The rest blurred. Honoria's pale outrage, Ashford's retreat, society's hushed recalculations. But Evelina no longer cared, because the Duke of Ashbourne had chosen her, not as ornament, not as shield, but as wife, as equal, as beloved. Weeks later, Ashbourne's estate glowed with new life. Debts settled, treachery crushed, scandal sheets turned to whispers of admiration. Evelina walked the halls not as decoration but as duchess in truth, welcomed, respected, adored. Her father slept without creditors pounding at the door. Her sister laughed freely again, and Evelina woke each morning with Alexander's arms around her, his breath warm at her neck, his heart finally unguarded. One night, beneath candlelight in their chamber, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. Do you regret it? He asked softly. The bargain you made with me? She smiled through tears. Love was never in the bargain, and yet it became the very heart of it. His kiss sealed her words, tender and unhurried. Outside, the world still whispered, still watched. But inside, Evelina was no longer afraid. Because she had won more than survival. She had won love. And with it, everything.